Welcome to Speaking of Grace, the weekly message podcast from the Whole Life Church in Orlando, Florida. We're a multi-ethnic, multicultural, and multi-generational congregation committed to our mission of loving people into a lifelong friendship with God. We are committed to our vision of being a church without walls, fully engaged in serving the people of our community. Thank you for joining us as we continue Speaking of Grace.
Hello there, family. Thank you guys so much for scooting in and making room for the people who are looking for seats. I think we need a bigger space. We'll figure it out. Don't worry. We'll figure it out. There's also first service. I think there are about 500 of you here right now. There are about 250 for just making an observation. I don't blame you. I like sleeping in too. So, question. What's something you really want to do but haven't? I want you to turn to somebody near you that preferably isn't someone you know. If it's only people you know around you, fine. But what I'm saying is, if you can, turn to somebody who's going to be surprised, like, oh, I didn't know that. What's something you really want to do but haven't? You got 30 seconds, go. Five-second warning. And stop. It works with kids sometimes, I don't know. All right, you're having too good a time. All right. Some of you are getting very detailed with each other. All right. So I don't just need you to stop for a second. Don't worry, I'm going to let you talk a little bit more because the next question you're going to answer the person that you just told us to is, what's preventing you? All right, I'll give you 10 more seconds. 9, 4, 3, 2, 1, and wrap it up. There we go. Oh, that was really good. I like that. All right. So, again, I'm going to give you another chance to talk to me really quick. So I don't care what it is that you wanted to do, but what I am curious is what's preventing you? So somebody said fear, okay. What? Not the right time. Okay, cool. Money? Yourself. You're preventing you from doing it. Is it for your best good or just because? Ambition. Why are you preventing yourself?
It's a whole psychological thing.
Do you want a chair we can sit and talk? No, sit down. I'm kidding. You're not going to do that. So I heard fear, I heard money, not the right time. Timing is a big deal. That is a big deal for things. Motivation. Okay, love it. Well, today in the WetMore summer series where we're going through different stories in the Bible that involve water, I wanted to tell you a story that I think really centers around a phrase in this story that involves the word prevent. And the story says, what is to prevent? And it goes on. So I want I want to focus on that a little bit this morning, but I really want to tell you the story. I want to break it down a little bit for you, and then I want to talk to you a little bit about what do we do about the things that are preventing us from doing the things we really want to do, or the things that we feel, could we even use a spiritual term, called to do? So let's talk about Philip and the Ethiopian court official. If you're not familiar with the story, it is found in the book of Acts, chapter 8, and it's going to start in verse 26. And Acts 8, verse 26 says, "But an angel of the Lord spoke to Philip, saying, 'Get ready and go south to the road that descends from Jerusalem to Gaza.'" Now, Philip, let's go ahead and establish who Philip is if you're not familiar with this. Some of you may think, oh, is this the disciple Philip, one of the 12 disciples? It is not. It is actually one of the 7 deacons that the 12 disciples create these deacon positions earlier in the book of Acts. And this particular deacon's name was Philip. And so this is who we're referring to. And so an angel comes to Philip and says, hey, you need to head to the road that descends from Jerusalem to Gaza. Well, I know what most of you are thinking. If an angel shows up and tells me to do something, I'm going to go do it. But I want to suggest to you that maybe if you were living in his time, you might have had second thoughts about doing this. Because this road that descends from Jerusalem to Gaza is desolate. It's a desert road. There are not many people on it whatsoever. And if one of the things that you would need to know is, in those times, desolate roads were roads that robbers and thieves would hang out on. This is where you're going to get robbed because you're by yourself. And so God's actually sending Philip to a very dangerous place, and for no apparent reason. You know, it's not like he's going to be proselytizing people as they come down the road. At least that wouldn't be the way it would seem to him. There are not going to be very many. This is not a high density area where he's going to be able to talk to a lot of people. So for Philip, he must have sat there and thought, well, seems like an incredibly bad idea. And yet Philip doesn't let his fear, his questions get in the way. Philip got ready. I love that it says he got ready. I don't know what that involved, but he got ready and went. And there was an Ethiopian eunuch, a court official of Candace, queen of the Ethiopians, who was in charge of her treasure. And he had come to Jerusalem to worship. And he was returning and sitting in his chariot and was reading Isaiah the prophet. So now we're introduced to the other main character in this story. We have Philip, follower of Christ, one of the deacons. And now we have this Ethiopian court official who happens to be eunuch. Kids, be sure to ask your parents what that is. You're welcome. I will let mom and dad explain it. All right, so because this gentleman worked with a queen, he was a eunuch. And when it gives the queen's name as Candace, one of the things to understand is that is a title, not a name. So the ruler of Egypt is called Pharaoh. That's a title of somebody. And so the queen of the Ethiopians was always known as a Candace. So this is not the name of a person that you can track down and say, oh, it was this queen or whatever. This is just like saying it was the Pharaoh of Egypt. So that's the way to understand that. Now, also to understand in the biblical times and the language that's being used here, when it says Ethiopia, it's actually referring to anything south of Egypt in Africa, on the continent of Africa. So anything south of Egypt is going to be referred to very nebulously as Ethiopia. Another little fact that I think sometimes gets way overlooked in the Christian faith is that the continent of Africa actually has a long and rich history with Judaism and with Christianity. And so, for instance, if you go back to the Old Testament, you'll find the Queen of Sheba coming to visit King Solomon because she's heard of his wealth and his wisdom. And Solomon talks about the God that made that possible. And so it seems very likely that a number of Ethiopians or people from south of Egypt on the continent of Africa came to know about this amazing God that the Israelites followed and served, and also chose to serve and follow this God as well. And so this particular gentleman is a court official. He's got to be smart. You don't put dumb people in charge of your money. At least you shouldn't. Maybe you think you have. I don't know. That's your own issue to work out. But generally, you're looking for super smart people to be in charge of money. You're also looking for very trustworthy people to be in charge of your money. And so these are some things that we could infer about this gentleman. Very intelligent, probably very well read, highly educated, trustworthy, honest. He's also very pious because he's made a trip to Jerusalem to go to the temple where Yahweh, God of the Israelites, God of the whole earth, we believe, right? But he's a follower of that God, and he decides he's going to take a trip. It would have been expensive, and it would have taken time. It was not just something you just do frivolously. But he does this. And what becomes even more interesting about him making this trip is he probably would have been familiar with the writings of Moses. Well, in the writings of Moses, do you know who's not allowed into the assembly? Eunuchs. Yeah, Moses says no person who's a eunuch may be allowed in the assembly of God to come and worship, basically, together. So what kind of faith did this guy have to show up in Jerusalem and be like, hey, I'm going to get as close as you'll let me? By the way, isn't that just a little heartbreaking to think about how many people want to come to God and we were like, this is as close as you can get? Sorry, you don't fit the right bill. Clearly in Deuteronomy it says that eunuchs are not allowed. Think about it. But this man makes the trip. We don't know how close he was allowed to get. The closest that he possibly could have gotten to worship in the temple would have been the court of the Gentiles, which is an outer court, which is the court that Jesus cleared of animals because they were selling things in that area, so it wasn't exactly the easiest place to worship. That's the closest he possibly could get, and many scholars believe he probably didn't even get that close, that they were like, no, you're a eunuch, you're going to need to stand outside here. But this man makes the trip. It's worth it to him. He loves God. He wants to have that experience. He gets as close as he'll be allowed to get. And on his return journey from this religious pilgrimage, he probably has purchased in Jerusalem a scroll because he had the means. He was wealthy. He could do this. He purchases a scroll, and he's sitting in his chariot reading what we would call the book of Isaiah today. So he's reading from Isaiah the prophet in his chariot, which was probably more like a covered carriage of some kind. So Philip is on the road. He's at the right place, right where God wanted him to be. And the Spirit said to Philip, go up and join this chariot. Now, again, sometimes we read through the Bible so quickly, we don't really stop and think about the implications of what this man's being asked to do. For instance, should the Vice President of the United States or the Secretary of State visit Orlando, and the Spirit of God said to you, go knock on their armored car window? You following along now? This guy was not traveling alone, trust me. He had guards, he was well protected. And so Philip is going to take his life in his hands, because you don't just walk up to a rich person like that or a high official and just be like, hey dude, what's up? No, this is serious. But God says, I want you to go up and join his chariot. And give Philip credit. He ran up to the carriage and he hears him reading from Isaiah. Now he's reading out loud because in ancient times people usually didn't just read silently. They'd actually speak it as they were reading along. And so Philip can hear what this gentleman is reading. And I want you to notice Philip's evangelistic tactic here. When God tells you to reach out to somebody, to go meet somebody for him, A lot of times we have our own agenda. Well, thank you, God, for telling me to go talk to that person. I'll go ahead and let them know what they need to know. Hey, do you know the truth about the Sabbath? Do you know what happens to you when you die? Do you understand the 2300-day prophecy in Daniel chapter 8? We'll come up to somebody and we'll tell them what we think they need to know. I want you to know that's really not probably God's tactic, but I think that Philip actually demonstrates God's tactic. Philip gets close, he sees what's happening and hears what's happening, and he engages with what's happening in this man's life right there. He doesn't say, well, you're talking about Isaiah, but what you really should be looking at is Daniel. That's where it's at. Instead, he says, do you understand what you're reading? How many of us start off with a question when we want to talk about Jesus to somebody? Philip, I think, is a beautiful example of what it looks like to really do a good job of sharing Christ. He starts off with a question. Do you understand what you're reading? Clearly, you're engaged with it. You're reading it. Do you understand it? Now he has an option. He can say, yep, I totally understand what I'm reading. And by the way, if he had said that, which is not what he says, Philip could have said, oh, cool. Tell me about it. What does it mean to you? Tell me more. But no, the man says, how can I understand unless someone guides me? Anybody else read the Bible and felt that way before? You're in a passage, maybe in Isaiah, and you're like, I know I'm supposed to read this. All scripture is inspired by God, and I'm trying, but I have no idea what's going on here. And so this man clearly seems to understand that Philip is able to help him. And so Philip comes and sits down in the carriage with this man and starts a Bible study. The passage that this gentleman from Ethiopia, this court official, is reading is from Isaiah. And it's this: he was led like a sheep to the slaughter, and like a lamb that is silent before its shearer, so he does not open his mouth. In humiliation, his justice was taken away. Who will describe his generation? For his life is taken away from the earth. Isaiah 53. And so he's reading, by the way, a very relevant passage for a Christian in their understanding of who the Messiah is. By the way, I want you also to know that 3 chapters later, so maybe a couple more turns of the scroll, in Isaiah 56, the prophet says, in that day, referring to a future day, maybe the day of Christ, in that day, let not the eunuch say, I am a dried up, withered reed, because you will basically, and I'm going to paraphrase it right now, you will have descendants. You will be a part of the assembly. You will be a part of the community. You wonder if, I always wonder whether Philip actually got to that part with him, if he moved on from Isaiah 53 and said, and by the way, Jesus fulfilled this prophecy in Isaiah 53. He is that suffering servant. And by the way, you now have a place. You don't have to sit in the outer court. You don't have to sit outside. You have a place. Christ has bought it for you. It does not matter that you are a eunuch. It does not matter that you're from Ethiopia. It does not matter. You belong in God's kingdom. The eunuch answers Philip and says, tell me, who's the prophet talking about, himself or someone else? By the way, this is still a debate between Christians and our Jewish friends. I have a friend who's a rabbi. We've gone back and forth on this. He is absolutely, completely convinced that this passage is Isaiah speaking of himself. Christians, we have a different viewpoint. We think Isaiah is speaking of Christ, the suffering one. And Philip opens his mouth and begins teaching from the scripture. And by the way, did you notice, what does he preach to him? Jesus. Fundamental doctrines. Maybe, but it was Jesus in the fundamental doctrines. Do we understand that when we talk about doctrine, when we talk about beliefs, they're only relevant so far as Jesus is in them? And Jesus is in the doctrines, my friends. Doctrine is a good thing. I'm not bashing it. I want you to understand, but you've got to have Jesus in it. If Jesus isn't in it, it's not worth anything. It's only as Jesus is in it. And so Philip preaches Jesus. So as they went along the road, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, look, water. What prevents me from being baptized? What prevents? This is not just a rhetorical question, I don't believe. I believe this is a man who is used to being rejected spiritually. And I really think he really meant it. So, Philip, you've told me a lot of really good news. What's the catch? What's going to prevent me from being baptized here? You've told me about this, but do I get to be a part of this? Verse 38, and he ordered that the chariot stop, and they both went down into the water, Philip as well as the eunuch, and he baptized him. The language, by the way, there is the idea of complete immersion, that Philip completely takes that man under water and brings him back up. That's just one chariot ride. By the way, those of you who are really paying attention, what happened here? We missed verse 37. Look, I went from 36 to 38. Why did I do that? Well, because in the New American Standard Bible, it'll be in brackets. In some new translations, it won't even appear at all. And the reason why is the Seventh-day Adventist Bible Commentary and many other commentaries, and most theologians agree, the Adventist Bible Commentary says that the evidence is that verse 37 was actually added at a later date by a very well-meaning scribe who's like, there's no way that we can go from verse 36 where he says, what's to stop me from being baptized, and just say, yep, you got baptized. You have to check off all we got to show that he checked off. And so a well-meaning scribe inserts this verse, it would appear. And so the Adventist Bible Commentary says that's one of the reasons why generally it will get left out, because the way that we look at the way these things are done, it probably shouldn't have been there. It was added at a later date. That doesn't change about verse 37. It is that it is theologically correct. It matches up with the rest of the New Testament. What do you need to be? So you need to believe with all your heart. I believe in Jesus Christ as the Son of God. And Philip says, great. Well, let's baptize you. Let's do it. Family, I want you to understand what baptism is and what it isn't. I think sometimes we make it a little bit more complicated. I find a lot of people being prevented from being baptized because they believe that they have to get to some sort of spiritual place. That it's, we kind of view baptism as a funeral. It's a celebration of life that was, and now you don't have to do anything else because you're baptized. You've checked all the boxes. You've done everything right. You're sinless. You're holy. You can be baptized. But that's certainly not the way that Jesus describes baptism in John chapter 3. Jesus describes baptism as birth. You must be born again. And all of us understand that when a baby's born, they don't come out eating, Swiss steak or Big Franks or even steak, right? Babies come out needing a lot of help. They're going to grow. We expect they're going to learn something. There's been 9 months of gestation, but they've got a lot that's going to happen in front of them. And let me explain to you that baptism is no different than this. When somebody gets baptized, you do not need to understand every theological nuance of everything. There's a few little things that are pretty important for you to understand. Jesus, you need to understand that. You need to be committed to following and growing in Jesus, because that really is what baptism symbolizes. It symbolizes a turning away of living for yourself, selfishness and sin, and a turning to Christ and saying, I want to do things your way. I know I'm not always going to get it perfect, but that's what I want. I want to follow you. I want to do what you want me to do, and I want to grow. And the problem is that when we make baptism something that it's not, a final destination as opposed to the beginning of a journey, we tell people you don't have to grow after you get baptized. All you have to do is just kind of maintain. It's a maintenance kind of thing. But just like when somebody dies, there is no status, no static position where you can just be neutral. When you die, you start to decay. And so that's why it's important that if you're going to be reborn, that you understand that being baptized means growing, not decaying. And so that's what baptism is about. And I think it's also very important to notice how quickly it happens in this particular case. Philip goes, it couldn't have been more than an afternoon. I also want to point out that Philip does do a Bible study with him. Like I said, it's important for you to understand some things. So there is some study that goes into it, but it doesn't take a long time. And this man knows what he wants to do, and Philip says, done. I'm not going to sit there and put you through some, well, go ahead and let me show, you prove it to me for the next 3 months. No. You want to be baptized? Let's do this. What prevents? Sometimes we prevent good people who are ready. And sometimes good people who are ready prevent themselves because they think I just need to be one step more. It's kind of like when I talk to couples who are ready to have a baby, and they'll be like, well, we just need to pay off one more bill. And I'm like, yep, there'll always be that bill. That will keep coming. Well, we need to do a little bit, and my thing is like, if you're not ready for kids, that's fine. But if you want to have kids, there's never going to be a good time. If you want to have kids, you're just going to have to choose to do that, recognizing that there are better times to have kids, yes. There are certain bills that are probably good to be paid off, but there's never going to be a perfect time. And the same thing is true when it comes to baptism. If you wait till everything is perfect, you will be waiting and it'll never happen. And baptism is important the same way that a wedding is important. It's a celebration. It's going in front of your friends and saying, I've made a choice. I've chosen to do this, and I want you to hold me accountable. I want you to know that this is how I want to live, and I want you to celebrate that with me and also to walk with me. Well, this baptism happens in front of this man's entire retinue, and then Philip pieces out. When they came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord snatched Philip away, and the eunuch no longer saw him, but went on his way, rejoicing. I love how this story ends. By the way, you do know that the Ethiopian church is one of the oldest Christian churches. It is. It's one of the oldest standing Christian churches out there. We don't know who this eunuch was. We don't know his story. We don't know what he did when he got back. We don't know. Because there's a gap of several hundred years between when the Ethiopian church is formally established and this period of time. But it would appear that he was the seed that created Christianity as a major influence in part of Africa. And so I think that's one of those neat stories that we ought to be more aware of and recognize the rich history that Christianity has around the world. So as I close off with you today, what's preventing you? And I know probably a large part of you are saying, I've been baptized, this isn't for me. Then my question is, what's preventing you from being like Philip? What's preventing you from sharing Christ with the people that Christ brings into your reach? The people that you hear God saying, hey, go up to that carriage and knock on the window. Hey, and you think, well, I can't do a Bible study. I don't know how to do that. Maybe you don't. But can you ask questions? Can you point towards resources? Say, hey, whole life is where I worship. You should come with me. Love for you to meet Freud. Love for you to meet Aubrey. Love for you to meet Ken. What's preventing you? Because you all named off things that you want to do, things that are near and dear to your heart that you want to do. We talked about what prevents you, but on the spiritual realm, what is preventing you from doing what you hear God calling you to do? And if God is calling you to do it, I have news for you. It doesn't matter what your fears are. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how intelligent you think you are. These things do not matter, because if God calls, God equips. So, in that spirit, what I want you to know is that in August, we're going to be starting an Adventist beliefs class during our Sabbath school time, and Freud will be leading that. But also, we're going to be starting an entirely online Bible study series that I'll be leading out with. We'll have 3 different sessions during the week. You can pick any week which one you want to attend. So it doesn't matter if everybody shows up to one, that's fine. We'll be doing it through Zoom. We'll be doing it entirely online. So there is absolutely no reason, no matter where you are in the world, that you couldn't join us if you want to do that. And we'll have you be a part of that. So that's going to start in August, so be watching for information about that. You can also tap the button in front on the chair in front of you and just click the button that says, I'm interested in Bible studies or baptism if you haven't already done it. If you've already done that, we've got your name. We'll be reaching out to you. Don't worry about it. But if you haven't done that, feel free to click that. And then the second ask that I have for you is this. If you've always felt like you'd like to learn how to share your faith, you'd like to learn how to give people Bible studies, I'd like to invite you to learn. And I believe you learn by doing. And so what I'm going to invite you to do is be a part of my August Bible study. So you're going to get to sit in on the Bible study. I'm going to ask you to mute a little bit so that the people who are really learning can have the conversation mostly. But basically, I'll do 45 minutes of Bible study with the people in that study. And then the last 15 minutes I'll spend with you who are wanting to learn how to do it. We'll debrief why I did what I did, how things work. And you'll have an opportunity to say, oh, this is how it's done. I'm going to make it a little hard for you. You have to send me an email if you want to be a part of that. My email's easy. It's ken@wholelife.church. Ken, like the Barbie, but I don't look like the Barbie. ken@wholelife.church. Send me an email. Just all you have to say in the email is, I want to learn. I want to learn how to give Bible studies. I want to learn how to share my faith. I will make sure that you're included in these, and we will make that happen for you. So family, what's preventing you?
Hi, this is Randy McGray, podcast producer and host here at Whole Life Church. Loving people into a lifelong friendship with God is our mission at the Whole Life Church, and our podcasts are designed to help facilitate conversations that help us grow together in that pursuit. Now that you've heard the message for this week, don't forget to check out the Whole Life takeaways for this message. Swipe up in today's show notes and join the conversation. Speaking of conversations, each Wednesday morning we take a closer look at the week's message. That's right, the one you just listened to. We discuss practical ways to apply spiritual lessons and ask honest questions about the issues we face as Christians, all focused through the lens of grace. Your voice is a welcomed addition to that conversation. We encourage your thoughts and your questions by sending a voicemail or text to 407-965-1607 or send an email to podcast@wholelife.church. You can find everything podcast related on our website, wholelife.church/podcast. And plan on spending every Tuesday evening and Wednesday morning with us as we bring you the Whole Life Church inspiration you love straight into your headphones. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.